Yeah, so I'm just going to provide a quick update on Kedro and specifically trying to focus on some of the stuff since Kedro 1.0. So real quickly before we get started, I covered this a little bit earlier today, but Kedro is a toolbox for building production-ready data and AI pipelines and applying software engineering principles and the principles of modularity, reproducibility, maintainability to the data code that you write. It's a LFAI and data graduate project, graduated in December of 2024 after becoming donated to the foundation back in 2019. Has 10,000 plus, actually I think it's close to 11,000 GitHub stars, a healthy contributor community with at least 100 plus repeat contributors. I got lazy and I just saw that there were 100 on the GitHub list and then didn't look further. As well as a lot of users, 2,600 plus in Slack, thousands of organizations using it. Kedro is maintained by contributors across a number of organizations. I didn't really cover this earlier today too much in my talk, so I'm just going to real quickly say what are the main components that Kedro provides. So a few of the big things that Kedro has are, one, a project template, the concept of a data catalog, and then as with any DAG tool, nodes and pipelines, I'll go into each of them real quickly. So Kedro has often been described as something like cookie cutter 2.0. And cookie cutter data science 2.0. It provides like a opinionated project structure so that as you're going from one team to another, one Kedro project to another, you can easily pick this up. It's pretty standard Python packaging best practices. Your code is in source. If you're working with any local data, then that's going to be, you can have it in a data folder. You can have your configuration that's stored in a configuration folder. Pretty straightforward things. Sometimes you see people writing blog posts about hey, this is how you should structure your Python project. This kind of gives that to you for free. It is opinionated, but one of the things that I will highlight is that over time, Kedro has also become a lot more flexible in this regard, because as we see that Kedro is being used across so many different organizations, they might have their own standards. So if you want to use a flat layout instead, if you want to define your configuration in different places and so on, it's all supported. And then you can build your own standards and starters for your organization. The data catalog is probably a lot of people's favorite piece about Kedro. It provides a hierarchical config loader and the ability to define a standardized pluggable interface for how you load and save data. And so this can be for anything. So it can be oh, I'm going to load from a file system into my pandas or polars or IBIS, as we were talking about earlier. It could be for loading Xarray files or some GeoJSON files. Literally anything that you can wrap, for example, Hugging Face data sets, anything you can wrap that has some sort of a load or save, you can provide this sort of unified experience around how do you handle this I/O. Kedro's nodes are just pure Python code that you're able to kind of orchestrate as part of your pipelines. One of the benefits of this is that then you can write your standard unit tests and everything as you would. It also really helps that journey for a lot of data scientists, for example, might be coming from notebooks. And so if you can get your code in notebooks for structured functions, then you can bring that in as just Kedro nodes without any change. One of the things actually we've been doing in the AI space is helping automate that journey from migrating from notebooks to more maintainable Kedro pipelines. Speaking of pipelines, the last kind of big piece that I want to talk about is the pipelines. So when you have the Kedro data catalog, each of the pieces in a data catalog is a catalog entry. I mean, it's essentially a key. And the way that nodes are, they're basically functions that take various inputs, have outputs. And the pipeline is basically what stitches this all together. So based on those keys as inputs and outputs to your nodes, you're able to kind of just say figure out what the structure of that DAG is going to be, and you can use Kedro's various support for different sorts of runners. This is also an extension point. If, for example, you want to run things on Kubeflow or something, you have a Kubeflow runner, and so on. And it also supports injection of things like parameters and so on. One of the things that people often notice is that Kedro doesn't really follow this sort of decorator-based syntax that you'll see a lot of kind of orchestrators use. And that's a trade-off. That can often look really clean, but I think also if you look at this and you're trying to then do like generation of like kind of complex pipelines off of that, or if you're kind of doing like reuse of these nodes, then you see that, oh, now I'm putting a whole bunch of arguments into my decorator, and it no longer looks so clean. And so like Kedro has intentionally gone that way, but that decorator syntax for especially the simpler cases and more straightforward ones is something that we're also kind of exploring through some of our proposals right now. I covered this a little bit, like as far as like an analogy goes, like Kedro is a transformation framework. A lot of people also call it a micro-orchestrator framework, not to be confused with something like Airflow or Kubeflow or Dagster or something which you would actually integrate with for that like deployment concern. But it is like a transformation framework or Python transformation framework. Kedro recently, so 1 year ago almost, hit 1.0. This slide says it's a public API commitment. In my view, it's actually more indicative of commitment issues because a lot of people were saying like, hey, why don't you have a 1.0 release yet? Kedro was very stable to begin with and very cognizant of like any breaking changes even between those minor releases. 1.0 is just an even firmer commitment around that. There were a few kind of big things that also landed as part of 1.0. One of the biggest thing was the data catalog refactor, allowing you to kind of work more cleanly with the data catalog through like some of your key syntax and things, and making this a better experience for users who otherwise sometimes had to go through some more internal methods for modifying the data catalog programmatically. Some other big things, I won't go through all of these here, but Kedro Viz, which is how you can have a tool for viewing what your overall pipeline structure looks like and kind of dive into each of those nodes and look at even visualizations and things in there. Also added this workflow view. And one of the last things is Kedro project has always taken great pride in stocks to the point that stocks have been submitted to like competitions and won like competitions for that. So like one of the big things for 1.0 was also a revisiting of the information architecture and a whole revamp of the docs. One of the big things with Kedro is that it's very amenable to kind of being extended through various ways. So we talked about the data catalog, which is, so we see Kedro datasets as one of the kind of major integrations. Datasets itself could be viewed as like so many different integrations, and it's often where a lot of people contribute their code, because datasets are essentially, you can be for whatever library you're working with, you can add like essentially this connector integration, and Kedro has a lot of these broken up into the ones which are maintained by the Kedro maintainers, and then those which are like more experimental or subject to change and could often just be maintained by external contributors as well. You can always have your own too. There are also other kind of big integrations which are maintained by a team, Kedro Viz, Kedro Airflow, Docker. One of the things I talked about briefly earlier was working with Pandera. A Pandera native integration into Kedro is going to be coming soon. This is going to follow a similar approach as Pedantic, which we now have a official path for validating your parameters and constructing those Pedantic models directly from injected parameters as part of the framework. A big part of Kedro is also a lot of these community-led integrations. Kedro MLflow being another Linux Foundation project, is probably the most popular integration out there. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, as well as Kedro Databricks and Kedro Dagster. Kedro Kubeflow and integrations with a lot of other orchestrators are also there. So yeah, especially in the, I want to highlight 3 big integrations. Again, Kedro MLflow. Kedro MLflow was widely used for experiment tracking, but one of the really cool things is also that you can use Kedro pipelines as custom models, those PyFunc models, and you can deploy them virtually anywhere that you could deploy a custom MLflow model. Another one is Kedro Databricks that allows you to deploy your Kedro code using the declarative automation bundles, formerly known as Databricks Asset Bundles. Very popular, widely used integration with Kedro. And then finally, Kedro Dagster is another one I want to highlight. So this allows you to write your code in Kedro, and then it gets mapped as to all of the Dagster concepts under the hood. So like for your like asset schedules, materializations, everything. And so again, like similar with a lot of the orchestration integrations, but it's really kind of great with that translator pattern into how it facilitates that deployment. Wouldn't be anything complete without talking about some of the AI integrations. There's a lot of things for like through Kedro datasets for the AI I/O sort of things. So for examples for some of the LangChain datasets and so on. There's also been work in adding more skills to Kedro, even from like that contributor perspective for like how do we help get those pull requests towards like that more mergeable state through like a Kedro babysit PR and through things like that, and a review process that knows about how Kedro code should be written. And then also Kedro, like I think one of the things Stephen mentioned earlier was that LLM context node and looking at how do we enable not just data pipelines, but also more of those AI pipelines through Kedro. Some other cool things, not just AI, Kedro Builder is going to be more your, for people who are new to Kedro and they want to be able to just like, hey, I want to just sketch out, drag and drop some pieces and get that overall project structure, maybe as my initial starting point. We have Kedro Builder. One of the other big things, so long time back, there used to be a plugin called Kedro Server and other similar things. And it's becoming more and more important for people to be able to kind of serve and deploy their pipelines. So the Sessions API is a big piece towards enabling that. And the last thing that I want to talk about is that some of the cool work that the community's been doing. A couple of things I just picked. There's so much more out there, but it's just around open science. One of the cool companies, EveryCure, is 501c that's been doing a lot of work around like how do we do like the drug repurposing and looking at like the drug disease pairs. So they've built this all out as a Kedro monorepo with integrations with some of the like popular things like with Pandera and using polars, I think, under the hood. But basically their whole project is a massive Kedro monorepo. It's a very cool open source thing to check out. Similarly, something I just heard about last week coming out of the Zitnik lab at Harvard is Optimus KG. It's a knowledge graph around like some of that medical knowledge and ontologies that they've also got some papers and various things out there, again, fully open source. And yeah, that's everything for me. Thanks.